Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Wednesday morning. Um, there's all sorts of political wreckage we could get into today, but from what I understand, you were loving the Grammys this past weekend.
I actually did not watch them, but the Tracy Chapman Luke Combs duet, of course, was fabulous. I've seen the tape and heard it, and there were people, Bill, who were kind of saying maybe it's a little bit of like cultural appropriation that this white country singer is covering this song and that it's now popular on country radio. And I think it's turned out to be great for everybody, including Tracy Chapman, and it's reintroduced this song not only to a new generation, but to a different demographic than you and I probably enjoyed it like back in the 80s. It's a great song, Fast Car, right?
Yeah.
So I think to me, this was a sign of cultural appropriation is a good thing, actually.
Well, it's not appropriation if the originator of the song is getting paid.
Fair point.
When appropriation is, okay, we white people are going to go to black communities, learn their sound, and then go make a profit off it, and they get nothing out of it. That's appropriation.
I mean, I think that's a fair distinction, which is why this was, this was a different thing, and I think healthy, very good. I don't see I really don't see a downside to this, but Bill, I would say that, while I believe in compensating people, and that I don't believe in stealing their material and all of that. What you've just described, I also think, nothing wrong with opening a taco restaurant if you're an Asian person or a white person.
Well, true. And look, it's art, and art doesn't have inherent boundaries. And what makes art evolve and become more interesting is the intersection of different cultures to develop new sounds. You wouldn't want to keep everything, frozen and siloed forever. It just wouldn't be as interesting. So it's not. I just wouldn't want to live in that kind of world where we weren't learning from each other. But there is this risk that we have seen happen where people who originate certain things that originate from other people's cultures get appropriated by white corporations, white artists, and it's not a two-way street. The people aren't getting any. I mean, how you could legislate that and regulate it is obviously very complicated, but it's something to be aware of, and I think it's healthy that we're aware of it. And I think people are approaching cultural intersection more sensitively now, being aware that we don't want to treat we don't want to just use cultures for profit and not without people being properly recognized.
Now, Toby Keith also passed away. His song, Bill, I Want to Be a Cowboy, or I should have been a cowboy, I think, was the #1 most played record on radio in the 1990s, and not just country radio. I believe it was the most played song on the radio. I saw you tweeted something about maybe you don't like this jingoistic courtesy of the red, white, and blue. He has other good songs. I concur. He's got quite a lot of good songs. I will defend courtesy of the red, white, and blue and say I actually like that song. But your point is well taken, that his catalog does not begin and end there.
Well, just look, I don't love a lot of things about Toby Keith's politics and attitude. I just heard an interview just after he passed, where he gave an interview just like a month ago, where he basically talked about being at peace with what's ever going to happen to him, and saying, that's because I have faith, and people don't have faith can't have that. And I was like, geez, Toby, if you're an atheist, you can't be at peace with the inevitability of death. That's not really a cool thing to say. So it's not like I love all of Toby Keith's politics and cultural attitudes. Although it should be noted, he called himself a Democrat for a very long time. He wasn't reflexively pro-war. He was very critical of the Iraq War, for example. I don't know if he ever said if he voted for Trump, though it would not surprise me at all if he did. He called himself a Joe Lieberman Democrat at one point, but was against the Iraq War, so obviously he wasn't all that much into Joe Lieberman. He always felt more kind of like America First Rand Paul-y to me. So like Trump seems to me to be very much in his wheelhouse of a guy he would be into, but I don't think he ever flat out said it.
Not that I'm aware. I mean, his prime was really the Bush era.
Well, he became associated with being. People assumed he was part and parcel of the Bush vibe because of Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, because he named an album "Shockin' Y'all," and did American Soldier, which was not as hard edged as Red, White, and Blue, but still seemingly in that I'm going to ride this pro-war, pro-troop thing for as long as I can. And so I think for a lot of people on the left who just reflexively don't like country music and a lot of what country music seems to represent, like you might not even think about checking out other songs. Whereas like he was a good songwriter, and there are certain songs that are very timeless, very widely accessible, that just deserve to, like if you were going to say like these are like the top 100 country songs of all time, like you'd put a few of Toby Keith songs in there because he was that good. And just as much if you were on the right, like I'm sure there are people on the left whose politics you don't like, but you'd say, you know what, I like this song, I like this TV show, I like this movie.
Well, trust me, as a conservative growing up in like the 1980s, if I limited my enjoyment of music to only people who agreed with me, it would be Lee Greenwood. You know what I mean? Like that would be Ray Stevens and Lee Greenwood would be the entire catalog there. So it's worth listening to. And I will say, Bill, I always remember, I didn't know that he was sick. I remember Toby Keith always being kind of, a little chunky, not fat, but, ruddy and healthy looking, and seeing him kind of look gaunt, and some of the photos at the end were not great for me to see. But again, I think his song, I Should Have Been a Cowboy, I believe played more than any other song on radio in the 1990s. So, we'll toast him. Toby Keith, one of the greats.
Actually, I love this bar, and as good as I once was, those to me are, peak Toby Keith. I understand, like if you're like, Chicks or Die, I totally like. I saw the Chicks perform. Like I never paid to see Toby Keith. I paid to see the Chicks. Like if we're gonna choose between the two, I'm gonna go with
Bill. Bill, let me just say, I find the term chicks demeaning. I prefer the Dixie Gals for political, to be politically correct.
I understand.
I am one of those people. I like the Dixie Chicks and Toby Keith.
Yes, and you can do that. You are allowed to like both.
I like them both. And by the way, let me just say, the Dixie Chicks have a patriotic song about a soldier who goes off.
Traveling soldier.
Traveling soldier.
Yeah.
So I salute the whole thing. And I even like the Dixie Chicks did a comeback where they did a comeback song. I ain't ready to play nice, something like that.
Not ready to make nice.
Yeah, that was a good song too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it all.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the whole thing. And sorry to see Toby Keith go, but he left us with a lot of good music.
And it's not exactly parallel, but I do think a lot of people had warm feelings seeing Tracy Chapman and Luke Combs come together, because you know what, these genres don't have to pull us apart. There's so much commonality, in music, and I just think that seeing them perform it together just showed how it's silly to treat these things as divisive elements when they came to unifying elements.
Amen, brother. All right. Well, speaking of divisive, I guess it's time to turn to politics. Let me just set this up, and I'll let you decide which of these things to talk about. But I think the theme of today's show has to be an embarrassing day for Republicans. And I'll just run through, maybe it's a bad day, maybe it's an embarrassing day. But I think just like in the last 24 hours or so, we're recording this on a Wednesday. You've had a Virginia appeals court, I think, determined that Trump is not immune, that he cannot claim immunity. We had Nikki Haley. She was the only person on the ballot, I think, in Nevada,
Right.
and she
No,
was
that's not
defeated.
true. I mean, I think like Tim Scott and Mike Pence were on or something.
Okay, she's the only active candidate on the
Correct.
ballot
Correct.
in Nevada, because there's also going to be a caucus where that's where Trump is playing. But Nikki Haley lost to essentially none of the above. So
Which in Nevada is an option. They literally have a none of the above option, which doesn't mean anything. Like if I think if it was a real election and a human being came in below that, I think that person still wins the election.
yeah,
Right?
but this was already a beauty contest anyway. The only
Correct.
reason for Nikki to do this was for PR reasons, and it ends up being incredibly, I think, humiliating and embarrassing, right? So she was never going to get any delegates anyway. The only reason to do this is to say you won the Nevada primary. She can't do that. She lost to the field or none of the above. Then we have.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, let me set this up, and then we can pick one to sort
Yes.
of go off about, rant about, a light on. And then you had the Republican House. They couldn't pass, or they've decided to torpedo this border deal, which is pure security. There's no pathway to citizenship, except I think for some Afghan interpreters or something like that. But essentially, it's all about security. Republicans have torpedoed that bill, thereby throwing James Lankford, the conservative Republican chief negotiator, under the bus. They're basically Marco-inizing him or whatever. Then Republicans tried to impeach Mayorkas, and failed at that. Normally you don't bring something to the floor unless you have the votes. So anyway, Bill, I don't see any other way to frame it other than just a very bad, no good, rotten day for Republicans.
I mean, I mainly agree, but let me just be a little devil's advocate for a sec. So Mayorkas will probably still get impeached on a second try. Steve Scalise was out for medical reasons. If he was present, they would get it by one vote. So I don't know when exactly he's planned to come back, but they could still eke this out. Now, I don't know. I know the New York 3 special election is next week. If a Democrat wins that, I don't know how fast he gets sworn in. I don't know how fast till Steve Scalise comes back.
Is this for Santos's seat?
Santos's seat, yeah. So I think there's a decent chance that Democrats pick that seat back up. It's not a given. It's not a total slam dunk, but it's a lean Dem seat, and Swazi is a known commodity in the district there. And notably, he has embraced the border deal compromise, and the Republican candidate has not. I don't know if that'll be the thing that determines the race, but you could look at it as a test case here. I mean, this is a district that is, PVI D+2. So it leans blue, but it's not like hard blue. And if Swazi has been kind of running a bit of a triangulation campaign, taking some shots at Democrats for not handling the border properly, saying their brand is damaged, but accepting this compromise. If he can win doing that, that suggests he's found political sweet spot that could send a signal to other people across the country. So I don't know if that's gonna, because I think we're at like we're like 219.
Yeah.
12
well, Bill, speaking of, this is like the Nikki Haley thing in the sense that it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, the Senate is not going to convict Mayorkas. So
Correct.
this was about, a signal and
also getting the show trial. I think they want to have the trial and use that as a platform to harangue the whole Biden administration's handling of the border. Now, it's possible. I think it depends on how you interpret the rules. I think there's an argument that the Senate's hands are tied and they have to have a trial. Some could say, well, they can just dismiss the charges and not have a trial. and some argue, well, they can send it to a committee and have the trial later. And I suppose it depends on how the majority wishes to interpret the rules of what they actually do.
And I think that's fundamentally the Republicans. Well, they've got a lot of problems, but one problem Republicans have is they don't have the presidency, they don't have the Senate, and they have a razor thin majority in the House. And yet they're operating in some ways as if they have everything. They want the perfect deal on the border, for example. They'd rather do nothing. So
they would rather have the border remain in chaos and say Biden could fix it by himself if he wanted to, and he won't. And if you put Donald Trump in, he will. Now, obviously, this is highly disingenuous because Donald Trump said when he was president, I need you to pass these bills so I have these powers so I can do this and that at the border. And earlier...
Plus, conservatives should not be in favor of laying down the marker that says a president can just do what he wants without Congress.
But this is Trump's political party, and this is a flip side of what I'm not saying moral equivalence, but plenty of Democrats going into the Biden administration said you can't trust Republicans. It's not worth trying to do half measures with them or giving them the opportunity to pull away the football. We have things that we have to do on climate, on the economy, on minimum wage, on voting rights, and we should just do them, and we should creatively interpret Senate rules or creatively interpret executive authority so these things can just get done without being hamstrung by them. And Biden has done certain executive orders, and they did certain things through reconciliation, but Biden did not do that across the board, and also found ways to find middle ground on various issues. On immigration, and look, this is something I want to write about today. So I'm under the deadline gun today. Immigration has just completely broken the Republican Party. It defines the Republican Party now. Like that is the one through line from the day Trump came down the escalator at Trump Tower and said, Mexico's not saying their best, they're sending drugs, crime, and rapists, and some of them are good people. Like that was the line from his announcement, and he goes back to that throughout the administration, in being president and in the post-administration. That is the thing he wants to be known by, the thing he wants people to believe he's going to fix. And everything else gets pushed to the side from that point. And the Republican wasn't like this before June 2015. Ronald Reagan passed amnesty. George H.W. Bush passed
Not only that, Bill, not only did Reagan pass amnesty, but I was just watching a video because yesterday, February 6th, was his birthday. Also Babe Ruth, also Adlai Rutschman. It's a good day. So I saw someone put a video out of Reagan. He was talking for like 5 minutes about how America is special because we have these new people who come and renew us and renew the American dream. And that's why we're out competing other countries. You can move to Japan, but you can't become Japanese. You can move to China, but you can move to France, but you don't become French. But anybody can come to America and become an American. And that is not only does that mean that we are welcoming, but that means that we are actually expanding and becoming more dynamic. And that was his worldview.
Right.
Which is the opposite of Trump's.
Right. And I don't think nothing happened in between those points.
Right.
And Trump just showed up on June 2015 and they were like this. There's definitely some, you go back to the Bush immigration bill failure in 2006 when Lou Dobbs went ballistic on CNN. Like every day was, border crisis. And the right wing rose up and thwarted that bill. And I know you can say the Democrats had handled that also, which is fair. But you saw the rising tide of nativism from that point. John McCain was the co-sponsor of that bill. It was the McCain-Kennedy bill. And then by 2010, he's running for election saying, complete the dang fence. His fingers are already in the wind on that in 2010. And
So
But Trump
personally,
is
Bill, and I'll just say, in defense of McCain and the whole thing. I mean, as a Reagan conservative, like I I really don't. If I don't care if we build a fence, I don't like the sort of symbolism of it. But I believe we should be able to secure the border for security reasons. I mean, you have to have a secure border and all of that. But I also think we should be welcoming a lot of immigrants and be compassionate.
the McCain measures in 2010 didn't balance those
Yeah.
points. He was
Well, I think he obviously had to, you know, reinforce his
that's what I'm saying.
position
Like
in the
the
primary.
party was
He had
already
to overcompensate is the
party
term.
was already changing before Trump's announcement, but Trump supercharged
Right.
it. And because Trump has made almost every other pillar of the Republican Party meaningless, like immigration is the paramount principle, or I should say fear of immigration, hatred of immigration, because it's not even just illegal immigration. They're mad about, there's a provision that in place now that a lot of Republicans want to get rid of. It's called humanitarian parole, where the president has authority to say, okay, we're going to suspend immigration law for you for a 2-year period. And Republicans say, well, but that's supposed to be case by case. And Biden's doing a carte blanche for Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, Ukraine. And of course, going back to the Reagan point, like Reagan would be like, hey, you're fleeing communism and want to come here. Come on board. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify Reagan, because he actually denied a lot of asylum to people fleeing the El Salvador Civil War and the Guatemala Civil War. So, I mean, he wasn't perfect, but he still had this overarching vision that he was pushing. And so I'm saying all this because immigration is the animating principle of the Republican Party right now, the animating focus of the Republican Party. It really disincentivizes splitting the difference on it with Democrats. This is why, Trump had his issue taken away from him.
But okay,
his
Bill,
issue is a form of betrayal. And he has communicated that to the base, to Republicans in Congress, where a guy like Jim Langford, who is not a squish and negotiated a pretty good deal from a conservative perspective, can't bring it over the finish line, because to do so would be to take away the one thing that is unifying the Republican Party right now.
Fair point. I think that's probably how some people on the right are looking at it. But there are receipts, Bill. They have been explicit in telegraphing the point you just made, which is to say, we are killing a bill that would secure the border for political reasons, because we would rather have the issue than solve the problem. Now, the question I have for you is, does that matter? Can Democrats use this now against Trump? Because they have the facts, and I think there's evidence, but does it matter?
I think they probably can. I've written this. They should have the opportunity to flip the script and say, we're actually trying to. These people say it is an urgent national security crisis. There's a potential of terrorists to cross this border and kill us right now, but we should wait a year until Trump's in office.
Yeah,
we could do something. And the counter argument is, well, I can't trust Biden to do anything about it. Okay, well then do it.
And then when Trump gets to be president, as he will.
If Biden doesn't do the job, then you can still say, well, I gave him these powers and he still screwed it up.
Yeah.
But to say we can't even try because it's going to help Joe Biden re-election is not putting the country first. So I think they have the opportunity to prosecute that case, and they're helped with a lot of Republicans on camera saying the same thing, either because they're mad about it or saying it relatively openly that that's their actual belief. That's okay.
No, I agree. There is a ton of evidence. I mean, there is so much video, not just from the last 48 hours or whatever, but the last year. There is so much video evidence of Chip Roy conservative Republican saying like, what have we done? We haven't accomplished anything. We have Congress. We don't do anything. I challenge you to come down here and tell me one bill we've passed that matters. Like, there's so much video evidence of, Trump and other Republicans saying things. And yet, Bill, I mean, if Bill Clinton were president, I have no doubt he would go out there and he would take that immigration issue and he would beat Republicans over the head with it. I wanted to do that, and I want Newt to come down here to this border and see what's happening. All the people flooding across. I mean, Clinton could do that. Again, this is a theme of our discussion.
Did you see Biden yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I mean, Biden gave a speech at the White House yesterday where he made all those points.
Bill, you're proving my point. You are proving my point. I didn't see the speech. It doesn't matter what points he made in a speech that I didn't see. Bill, I do this for a living, and I'm not saying that I'm the most dedicated or sharpest person at what I do, but like, if I didn't see it and I'm not aware of it, how on earth is it going to sink through to the average American?
Well, it's not just one speech one day. It's a message you prosecute over a period of time, and it can't just be Biden as an individual. It's got to be a team of people. But I think he's on point. I thought he gave a very cogent speech. It wasn't like, all thumbs Biden doesn't know where he is. Like, he was very straightforward and clear. Now he is speaking in his sort of like quiet grandpa voice. He has like quiet grandpa voice and like get off my lawn, screamy grandpa voice. Like, those are the two modes of Biden right now. And I understand that maybe not be the ideal, vibe you want, for president. But the thing that I believe is really going to drive the final result here is the economy. And I think it's hard to make immigration a driving issue while the economy is good. It's easier when the economy is bad and you're blaming immigrants for making the economy bad, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not saying they should deserve the blame, but like, I think logically speaking, politically logically speaking,
and with a 3.7% unemployment rate, and granted, right, there are people who've dropped out of the workforce, but with a very low employment rate, one could argue that there's a demand for more people, for workers.
No, I mean, there's an argument that inflation has gone down because we have immigrants helping with the labor market.
Right.
So, I mean, this is a hard thing for Biden because it gets complicated to argue all the nuances of the issue. But I just think that the types of things that sort of get people really riled up, immigrants are taking your jobs and they're cutting your wages. Like, that's not happening right now. Wages are beating inflation and unemployment is low.
But Bill, all that's true, and yet Biden's still losing in most polls that I see. That Quinnipiac poll may be an outlier, and it doesn't seem to be helping Biden. Now, look, the economy may be a lagging, sort of.
I think this will kick in time, so long as we stay on. I mean, if the economy takes a turn, I revise. But if we're going into election September, October, GDP is still solid, unemployment is still low, wages are still beating inflation, and the border is still not great because we couldn't get these things done. I think it will be hard for, like, right now, the news coverage is still a lot of border. And there are genuine stresses that is putting on certain communities. There are certain cities that are having a hard time finding shelter for people, and that puts a strain on municipal government budgets, which is one of the reasons why it's the worst polling issue for Biden. It's not just Republicans; there are Democrats who are annoyed with it, and that's why it's a genuine issue, a genuine problem to solve. But most people walking around day to day are not like directly confronted with an immigrant making their lives worse. Whereas like inflation, that like you go to the store every day and you see a price spike, like wherever you live, whatever your economic station, that affects you, that annoys you. If that's coming down, and most people, I had a guy say to me the other day, well, interest rates are still high, it's still hard to buy a home. I mean, people are still buying homes. And not everybody is trying to buy a home at the same time. So like the number
Plus,
of people
and
who are,
Jerome Powell has signaled that interest rates are coming down.
yeah, I mean, they may well inch down over time, but you might, well, if they're still,
I think they'll come down between now and the election.
yeah. So like, there's lots of reasons to believe that we're going to be broadly in good shape with the economy.
But Bill, here's what you don't get. The economy is improving because people know Donald Trump is going to win. Let's be honest. That's the reason the economy is getting better, because everyone knows Trump is going to win, and so that excites them and fixes
So
the
Donald
economy.
Trump said in 2020, if Biden wins, the stock market's going to collapse. When the stock market actually reaches record highs, it's because Donald Trump is coming back into office, and then Biden's presence has nothing to do with anything. Is really positive about the economy. And of course, the fact that the Obama economy was already up before Trump got in there, totally irrelevant.
We could go on, but I know you do have a deadline today. Any you want to call it a day? I think we've hit most of the low points of the Republicans' embarrassing couple of days.
Well, just to touch on Nikki Haley briefly, I mean, what is she doing? I mean, did she? I understand you could shrug off Nevada and say, "Look, this is symbolic. I didn't compete, I didn't campaign, didn't spend any money. The whole thing's the caucus is rigged for Trump anyway." Like, that's all true, but like, it makes sense to downplay a meaningless contest if there is a meaningful contest coming up that you expect to do well in. That's what doesn't exist. This is what's so ridiculous about what she's doing. Like, there is no safe harbor for her anywhere. All that's coming is her home state primary, where she is almost sure to be totally humiliated. So what her end game is completely escapes me.
Yeah. Well, look, I think there's two things at play. One, Nikki's getting publicity. Nikki was on Saturday Night Live, the cold open, and she did really well. She's getting attention.
Phillips in that area.
Yeah. She's getting attention. She's getting publicity. What's not to like if you're Nikki? And I also do think that, look, the election was, Donald Trump became the presumptive nominee after winning New Hampshire. I have no idea why she waited until after that point to start running a good campaign and actually being interesting and funny and talking about the grumpy old men and all that. But she finally has. And I think there's some net positives that are coming from what she's doing right now. I don't think she has a chance to win.
What are they? Can you name one for me, please?
I think that she is making fun of Donald Trump. And I like that.
Net positives for us, not for her.
I think there was, again, that Quinnipiac poll may be an outlier.
I mean, literally it's an outlier based on other polling that's come out recently.
Yes. Okay. And certainly in terms of the horse race, it's an outlier because it had Biden up by 6.
Yeah.
But within the poll, there was a finding that that Biden had gained among women dramatically. Okay. I think that it's very plausible that that's real. And if that's true, then you look at what happened in the month of January, because that's Quinnipiac polled in December. They polled again in January. And within that 1 month, there was all this movement among women toward Biden away from Trump. What happened? Well, I think 4 things happened. 1, Trump became the presumptive nominee, so it's real now. 2, you have the E. Jean Carroll, decision where she was awarded like $83.6 million. Then you have Nikki Haley, who is now unleashed and letting her rip. And then you have the Taylor Swift controversy, Bill, that we talked about last week. If you throw those things together, then Nikki's a part of sort of alerting suburban women that this guy is a bad hombre.
Well, we're going to see, I think, an enormous gender gap on Election Day. And what's going to be challenging for pollsters is, what's that turnout mix? Are we going to see women be more motivated to vote than you might otherwise expect because of things like this? Are men going to be riled up because of the border or other things? We're never going to know for absolutely sure, assuming the race remains close, which pollster is, calibrating the dials just right to match what the turnout's going to be. But to go back to my earlier point, I think when you get down to crunch time, things that put you on edge now, what's going on at the border? What does this mean for tomorrow? If this is happening today, what's tomorrow going to look like? Oh my goodness! Like that, Biden sounded a little mumbly today. Oh no, how's it going to look 6 months from now? It's like that kind of, I think, can depress the incumbent vote earlier. When you get close to election day, it's like, oh, all those things that I was really anxious about, they didn't actually happen. And I don't know, my job's looking pretty good, and I'm saving some money, and we got vacation planned. Why would I roll the dice on that guy when I last saw him? Like, gave me a giant pandemic.
The big X factor may be third-party candidates.
I know. I wrote a newsletter piece about that for the Washington Monthly newsletter. I mean, obviously, the polling would suggest that, and Kennedy, in particular, is raising a good amount of money. But and the no labels thing is still a wild card. But I am increasingly skeptical that any of these third-party operations are going to be on enough ballots to really matter. Cornel West has almost no money. Actually, I should have double checked if he even filed his fourth quarter report. He didn't do it on the day of. You might have done it by now, but what he had in the third quarter was like, changing the couch cushions kind of a bank account. I doubt that has changed over the last quarter. And Kennedy has raised a lot of money, but he's only on two state ballots potentially at this point. He's met the requirements for 2 state ballots, and he's got time. But he recently said he's talking to the Libertarian Party. And look, the Libertarian Party's got a good track record of ballot access. They got in all 50 last 2 times. No other third party has done that. But one, he has to get the nomination, which is not a guarantee. He has to win it at the convention, and hasn't been a pure libertarian all his life. But they've shown some partiality to sort of marquee names like Gary Johnson, who also was sort of an impure libertarian. But if he runs as a libertarian, it kind of gives away the game. Like, he's not a proto-Democrat if he's a libertarian. So I think it's harder for him to pull from the left if that's where he plants his flag. He's got to sound more libertarian to make nice with the libertarian delegates. So that, I think, undercuts the possibility of him being a spoiler for Biden against Biden. And then there's the no labels thing, and they're at about 14 states right now. And look, again, they have time, but the CNN just did a story on them. They're like, they don't even know what their convention is. They were going to do something in person. Now it's virtual, but now they don't know. And Larry Hogan just quit. Like, they don't seem like they're in great shape. I mean, again, maybe they can pull it together, but like, it's not easy to build a fresh new party. There are a lot of little things that you have to do. And there's not a lot of evidence that they're doing them in a very intelligent and efficient way. It's still an X factor, but it's also very plausible. Like, they're just not on enough states to, you got to get in. The way the media coverage works, you got to be in polls to drive media narratives. And there's no hard and fast rule about this.
So you're saying even if they're on the ballot, and I guess there is always the problem though of like what happened in Florida, with Nader and Pat Buchanan, that even if you're not competitive nationally, if it like what if no labels screws up Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, like one state, a few thousand votes could be the difference.
But Nader in 2000 was on, I think it was 43 or 44 states. Okay. Again, this is not a hard and fast rule, but I think if you're not above 40, I don't think the national polling operations are going to include you, because a good number of people can't vote for you. And if you're not in the polls, then you don't get the same media coverage. You can't drive narratives. Gary Johnson and Jill Stein were, cracking. They were on, 40 plus states. They're in the polls. They're getting a few digits. They got on TV.
But
Howie
don't you
Farman,
think?
who ran Green Party last time, was on 29 ballots and got zipped.
But just to play devil's advocate, I mean, you don't need the mainstream media anymore. Like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can go on Joe Rogan, and wouldn't that generate enough buzz to like potentially mess up something somewhere?
I don't think that's enough to be considered a legitimate candidate in the. I mean, look, if all you're pulling are whack job Joe Rogan listeners, these aren't the swing voters. Like, third party candidate can get the cranks. The question is, are you getting enough legitimacy that someone's gonna be like, oh, maybe this person has a shot, and I think it's worth casting a vote for this person.
Yeah,
Or this
actually,
person
you're right. I mean, if
something that I want to send a message by.
Rogan voters would potentially hurt Trump, right? I mean,
there's that potential
Yeah.
too, of course, particularly with Kennedy. I mean, he pulls some from both. We just know what the mix is because he's still kind of a murky figure to a lot of people. But I think being a libertarian makes it harder for him to be a drag on Biden.
well, we don't need to go into your boy Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin. We'll save that for Joe Rogan to comment on. I guess
he hasn't done it yet, right? We haven't seen the interview.
Yeah, he's been in Russia for multiple days, according to my Twitter feed. So,
all right, so maybe we can talk about that next week.
maybe.
I'm sure if a figure on the left went to Venezuela to interview Maduro and echo a lot of Maduro's talking points on Venezuelan soil, that wouldn't cause any kind of ruffle at all.
No, everyone would be pretty understanding of that, Bill. Let me plug a couple things.
Or China.
So first,
a better example of China.
I don't know if you've seen this, Bill. I'm a year late to this, but there's a show called Daisy Jones and the Six over at Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
And it's loosely it's from a book, but it's sort of loosely based on Fleetwood Mac. And not a perfect show, but I would recommend it.
Okay.
Just finished it. Can't recommend this. Haven't heard it yet, but I'm looking forward to Vampire Weekend, Bill. For those of us of a certain age, out with a new album soon. It's going to drop. I'm excited about that.
I'm distantly related by marriage to one of the Vampire Weekend members.
So you're saying there's a chance? I took my boys last week. I think it was last week. We saw Jim Gaffigan, the comedian.
Oh wow, great!
At Constitution Hall. That was fun. But I would love to take them to see Vampire Weekend. Maybe you can make that happen, Bill.
I don't know. And also through that connection, I'm also distantly related to Scott Baio.
So wait, is Vampire Weekend related to Scott Baio?
Yeah, there's another Baio in Vampire Weekend.
I have no idea. I think we broke news. I want to plug. I interviewed David Frum, and we obviously talked about the border, but we spent a lot of time talking about Woodrow Wilson and David.
You mentioned me, Matt.
You did not come up, Bill, but I saw you.
How could you not?
I don't want him to know that you and I are friends, but I think you and David probably agree. I think you guys probably are on the same page regarding uncanceling Woodrow Wilson. Yes, complex figure. Yes, did and said some bad things, but judged in the context of his times, it's a little more complicated.
As I always said, whether you love or hate Wilson, just an enormously consequential historical figure, and you're just not understanding the story of America if you don't understand Wilson's role, and if you minimize him as someone who resegregated parts of the federal workforce, you're just missing large chunks of the American story.
I think you and David are on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to plug, Bill?
Check out the Washington Monthly newsletter. You can see my piece about the diminishing threat of third parties. Several things about the border deal lately, and I should have a column about Republicans and immigration coming out tomorrow, which you got to get to work on.
Awesome. We'll let you get to work on that. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Subscribe at youtube.com/Matt Lewis. help us out. Go to patreon.com/Bill Scher and patreon.com/Matt Lewis. Wet our beak. Help us keep this pirate ship afloat, as Adam Carolla might say. And we'll see you back here in the DMZ next week.
Take care.
See you, Bill.